to part 2. Let's jump right in. The torso and everything else, we're going to need to scale that up. I'm going to fix the weapons. So I'm just going to go ahead and scale that a little bit. Apply the scale. I'm going to grab the leg set here, and I want to scale that up a bit, G and Z, to kind of bring it down, and then I'll grab the hips. I'll scale that on X, kind of bring that out, see if I need to increase the thickness. Not really. That actually looks pretty good, but I do want to make sure the origin is to the geometry. And remember, you can do that up here under the transform object menu, set origin to geometry once you've got that object selected so that you can get a proper rotation. I'm going to rotate that just a touch, and I'll apply scale. Now that looks a little bit better. Give it a little bit more of a logical proportion. We can just go through and do a little bit of cleanup. I do notice I've got one foot piece not shown there, so I'm just going to Shift D that, right click to drop it, G and X, just kind of move that over. Just kind of look over the mech a little bit before I start doing any booleans or anything. And I'm going to go into edge select here. It looks like we've got an extra edge set up, so I'm going to dissolve these edges here. Okay, that looks pretty good. And I'm going to check these other pieces a little bit, go through, see if everything looks pretty good. As you go through, some of these center pieces picked up the mirror. You just delete the mirror, you don't need that. And then I'll just scale this up a little bit, G and X, and I can move that over. And if that's a piece that I need to see a little better, obviously I can scale that out so it's more visible and apply the scale. So just kind of go through and find those things that obviously don't need a mirror and clean those up. The torso piece, of course, has a mirror and it needs one, so I'll go ahead and apply that mirror. So if I wanted to use that, let's apply scale, want to use that for anything else to mirror to the other side, then I'll be able to do that. Now I'm going to take up the side view. I'm going to grab the knee area. I want to bring the origin back to geometry here, and then I'm going to scale this on the Y axis. And just kind of hold shift if you want so you can get a good scale. Bring it to something that just starts to reveal this joint piece. Now select the joint, go into edge mode, select that edge. You can Control B and add a bevel here for segments. Be good enough. Now go back, that looks good. And so now we can kind of go through here and start adding some extra bevel pieces. You can add some chamfers. I'll select the foot. I'm going to come down here and grab this edge, and the chamfer may look better right here. Let's see. Yep, I like that. And then here I'll add a bevel to the front edge. And you should still be mirror modifying these. If you're not, then you'll have to individually select them. Then you can just grab both of these, or you can just delete one, and I'll just throw a mirror on here, and I want to grab an upper portion of the torso somewhere so I can mirror that properly. That looks good. I go into edge select here, Control B, and I'm going to add about 6 segments. Let's see how many I got. I got 8. I'll go to 6. That looks good. And maybe I can scale this piece up just a little bit, holding Shift, S and Shift, and then kind of scale that piece up a little bit. G and X. And there may be a couple of pieces in here, including this one that did not get a shade smooth and auto smooth and the whole deal. So I'll actually select this, select the foot, Control C, and copy the modifiers so that will actually start to fit a little bit better. And if you want, you can get in here and model this and bring all these pieces in a little closer. I'm not really going to do all of that. Keep this tutorial a little bit shorter. And make sure to enable auto smooth so it looks nice. Now we can do a little bit of work on the weapon here, and let's see. Let's grab the weapon, go into face select. I'm going to grab the outside edges here and Shift D, make a copy, Q, separate by selection, jump back out and select just that piece. And I want to add, and I'll forward slash so I can see what I'm doing. And I want to add a solidify modifier to this. And so we'll go ahead and add that solidify. I'm going to bring the solidify up. And I want to bring this to the outward measurements, if you will. And now I want to do, let's see, how do I want to make this look? Let's just go ahead and apply it. And then we can jump into edge mode, and let's add some loop cuts in here. Something like that looks pretty good. I could add one per section just to even up the geometry a little bit. And that looks pretty nice. So now that I've got the geometry, I want to add a wireframe to that. And I'll bring the wireframe up. And I want to turn off the replace original. And that way I've still got that bottom geometry and that solidify. And let's see, go with the relative position and then shift right click here for the thickness. You can kind of play with that however you want. You could even have added more geometry if you want. That looks pretty good. So forward slash back out just to give that some more detail. Now I'm going to go into face select with the weapon here, and it should be mirrored. If it's not, let's see here. If I inset, yeah, okay, so we are working with the mirror. It's working good. So if I inset this, and I will just extrude it back a little bit. That looks pretty good. I want to take up the front view, go back to object mode, and I may have to just pull the middle mouse wheel back a little bit so I can see better what I'm doing. And I'll make sure the cursor is to the geometry on this one. And I'm just going to put the cursor anywhere in here, Shift A, drop in a cylinder. And I want to make sure that that's at 64. You could probably get away with a little bit less, but I want to shade this smooth, auto smooth, rotate this, I believe X will do, and 90 on the number pad, enter, scale it down. That looks pretty good. Jump into wireframe here, go to 3, and I want to scale this on the Y. And it looks like my gun may be just a little bit off on its rotation. All right, that looks pretty good. Maybe scale it back just a touch more and maybe bring this up so it's kind of a pretty big barrel, but I want 2 to fit in here, so now I'm going to apply that scale. And it looks pretty good. And I'm not using Grid Modeler for this, even though I could, like in 2 seconds, I could make the geometry for that. I want to use something with a lot of really even cuts. It just works a lot better. And I'm just going to click here and apply scale and make sure that's good. And so let's take the top view, Shift D, G, Z, bring that down. I think that's pretty good. I'm going to duplicate these and then join the duplicates and Shift right click on the weapon, Control minus, and that should give me a nice boolean cut. So I want to put these inside of the bool tools and hide it, don't need it. And if I pull this away, you'll see we've got a couple of very nice, well-cut booleans there. I don't see any issues with them. We could, let's see, just hide that for a second. And I'll go over into the vertex mode with this, if it lets me do it. Nope, didn't apply my boolean yet. Let's grab the boolean and bring that up. And for some reason, the gun does not have the modifiers. So I'm going to apply the boolean before I do that so I don't mess anything up. Shift right click on the foot, Control C, copy those modifiers. So I've got that nice bevel set up here. And that looks good. Just make sure that your mirror is first, then your bevel, and then your weighted normals. And there's nothing under the weighted normals, and that's going to end up looking really nice. So the gun barrels ended up in the correct folder. Well, they ended up in the leg folder, which is fine. You can clean all that up and separate these a little bit later. All right, so that doesn't look too bad. And what you could do is you could put some supporting pieces in here if you want. I'm not going to go into that much detail. Not yet. You can make these a little bit bigger if you want. Now there are some other weapons and things we can put in here. So I'm actually going to grab one of these, take the front view, Shift D, and I'll bring that up here. Take up the top view, G, Y, kind of move that around until it's sensible. Kind of scale this back a little bit. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to scale it down a little bit more because these would be smaller weapons up here on the head. There we go. And Shift D, G, X, and kind of move that one over. And this one I'll scale in just a little bit, so I give it just a little bit of an offset from the other one. Now we can bullion these in as well. So we've got these weapons here. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and join these. And I want to bullion cut them, but first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mirror those to this part of the upper body here, so that way anything we do over there happens over here. And I'll Shift D and then right click, Control minus. I'm going to grab this cutter, M, put it in Bool Tools, H to hide it. And now I should have a nice bullion cut here if I hit G and move that. And I've got a nice cut. It looks like this one's not shaded smooth, so I'm going to shade it smooth. Go down to the auto smooth, go to the body, go to the modifiers, get the bullion, bring the bullion up, and that will clean up the shading issues. Then we can, do some things to the guns here since they're still mirrored. You can jump over and go into face select, and I will tap I. If it doesn't work, you can double tap. Just kind of extrude this a little bit, and maybe scale it in a little bit more. Extrude that, and then inset it, and bring these barrels out. Now you can add some geometry here to make this a little bit better. That's actually got 64 cuts on it, so it's maybe a little bit much, but it's okay. And just add some geometry in here so later when you're going to shade this, you won't have issues. I'll put 2 on the outside, about 4 on the inside there, and then do the same over here. And I'm just hitting Control R for that. That looks good. That looks good. And there we go. So now it's got a little bit of geometry. It shouldn't look too bad when we go to texture that and end up being a third video for that. Okay, so now we've got it cleaned up a little bit. We've got some weapons, and I actually need to mirror these. I can hit Control J and join those, and I will put a mirror modifier on that, and I'll use this same part of the body there to mirror those guns over. And we can go ahead and clean these up. So I'll jump into face select with these and do a little inset, and I'm going to make these barrels a little bit thicker and bring these pieces back a little bit more. I for inset and E to extrude these out, and I'll leave them just about on the edge, and I can add some extra geometry to these as well, so that'll look nice later. 2 cuts here. Probably end up with about 3 or 5 or 6. Yeah, 3 or 5 or 6. There we go. That's my math today. And there we go. And there we go. And we really haven't even done a whole lot of bullion cutting just yet, but we are definitely going to. Okay, starting to take a somewhat decent shape. Now these are still a curve object, so if you jump in to edit mode, you'll see that you could grab this and you could move it around still. And we're not going to convert that because we're still going to be using Cablerader to beef up the arms, just like right here how this is. So down here on this knee junction, wanted to add some detail. We do have this extra part here, which, you know, could be shocks of some sort, some kind of hydraulic pump system back here, right? And so we want to take this thing and work with it. And I'll grab the face select for this. And if you hit I, you'll see you get some shading errors, you get crossovers. You know, you don't want to do it too far anyways, but if you want to prevent some of that, you can go in to object mode, grab the bevel, and you could change the bevel for the whole thing very, very quickly. But you could just hold down shift and right click on the amount and sharpen that up a little bit. And then if I jump back over and hit I and start doing the inset, I can bring this down a little bit further away from that original bevel. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to extrude that in just a little bit. And one of those things we want to do is give this a nice look so that when you do shade it, when you do put some lighting on it, and I'll do the same thing over here, that the light is going to create all these nice little shadows in these intricate areas that otherwise would not have been there. And you can do the same to all these other sides if you want, and just add a little extra to it. Let's see, I'm just going to grab both sides at the same time. And this is where extruding along nozzles comes in, since I've got both faces of this, and this is mirrored, so don't worry. I hit Q and pull up extrude faces along nozzles. Now this will go crazy if you don't hold down shift, and you've got to move the mouse in the appropriate direction, like up or down, whichever way you want to bring it. I'm going to bring it to the inside and then left click, drop it, and that should end up looking pretty good. And I had to shade that smooth and then turn on auto smooth for that one. I seem to be having some shade smooth issues here, not holding it for some reason. No big deal though. And now this piece is not in line, so if I come over here, you can kind of see where that's not really lined up anymore. So I could rotate that, and I'll bring the origin back to the geometry on that, and I'll rotate that on X and maybe GX, and kind of bring that out just a touch. And that is at kind of an angle, so you just kind of have to play with it till you get it the way you want it. There we go, it's starting to look good. And you can go through this thing and add a bunch of other detail, but I'm gonna give you some extra hints here. Jump into face select here and grab these faces. I would say you could safely grab that one, shift D, Q, separate by selection, jump to object mode, come out, make sure you've just selected this one, and now you can hit / and kind of keep that workflow like that. And then you can do whatever you want to this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that solidify once again, and I want that to solidify outward, and that's going to jump all the way to the bottom, so you want to bring that up to the top. And if it's a pain, you can collapse all these other modifiers to make it a little easier, so you can see where this ends up at the bottom, the shading bad, bring it up to the top, shading is good. And now I can, well, I guess, yeah, it's pretty much an extrusion. Now that's just realize about the solidify, that's not real geometry until you apply the solidify, so it's always a good idea to do that. Now I'm going to go back, and really we don't have the detail language yet. I did use the wireframe up here, so you would, you know, potentially stick to the wireframe setup if that's what you want, and you could add a nice wireframe mod to that. Make sure to bring that up to the top. Don't have to replace the original unless you want to. Make sure even is selected, and you can change the thickness. Now this doesn't have a lot of geometry in it, so you could come in and add a few cuts just like that. And I'll jump back over and turn the modifier back on, and then I'll end up with something pretty decent, and keep the shape language the same. And I may just replace the original on this one, and it gives it a little bit of a cage look, which is pretty neat. Kind of follows a logical pattern here. And now I want to add details to 2, maybe 3 areas tops on the mech. So the weapons can get a lot of detail, and the leg area can get a lot of detail, and potentially the cockpit can get a lot of detail. And I want to leave everything else blank in the middle areas. I don't really want to do anything else, especially like when I'm going in to do my shading. I'm going to put decals and all kind of different things here, and I'm going to rip up this area a little bit. And then all these other joints and things like that, I'm going to leave them alone. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing for this. Shift D, separate selection, go out, select it, isolate it, solidify it, collapse these modifiers I don't need, open, bring the solidify up. Even thickness, make sure to select that. I'm not sure if I mentioned that before. Always select even thickness. Go ahead and apply that so that is real geometry. Come in and add some loop cuts, and just know that's going to be however you put these loop cuts, that's how they're going to show in the wireframe. The loop cuts are technically like the wireframe. And so if we come back to this, we can kind of match up what we've got. Don't really want to start changing that too much. And so now I can go ahead and throw in the wireframe, and I can have the cage and bring that up to the top. Or I don't have to replace the original, and then I can have that as a panel. Either way, however you end up doing it, I'm going to have mine as the cage just to keep things similar, and I'm going to go ahead and do the same to this one. I think the cage would be good just on the top pieces here. Separate, go out, select just the top, isolate it. Looks pretty good. Let's see, mirrors there. We did everything was good. Just collapse these ahead of time. Go ahead and solidify. Bring that up. Even thickness. Bring that thickness to the top. Apply it. Jump back into the edge mode here. Put 4 maybe. Keep it nice and even. And put 4 there. Just kind of right click if you get that out of line. Looks good. Now I can add the wireframe. Bring it up. Place original. Yep, I'll do that. Keep it the right way. Go relative, and I can play around with the thickness a little bit, because that is pretty skinny, but it's okay. So kind of come back, and now I've got that set up. And you know, this is very basic, very generic, but the general idea is that you have the high detail areas, and you have some noticeable similarities, and your eye will be led up to certain areas. And we want to put something up here that is special. Maybe when we cut in for the windows, you know, we can put some lights in there, maybe put a little bit of electronics or something that's visible. I'm sure there's an asset somewhere that would be very helpful for us. So I'm not going to do that to the center pieces, the center torso, the hips, and the upper leg areas. I don't really want to mess with those. Now I could do a little bit of extra here and isolate that, jump into face select, and I'll grab both sides of that and do a little inset. And this one is going to be a little bit of a pain, so let's see. Origin to geometry. There we go. And now I'll jump back over, and I will just use, let's see, I'll extrude this along normals too, because it's going to be a little bit of a pain. And that should be good for all sides. There we go. Looks good. Come back out. Give it just a little bit more definition. And let's actually come back here. Let's work on this a little bit more. Now if we go over into face select, there's no loop cuts, so let's add some loops in here. And I want to go to face select, and I actually want one more right here, and anywhere not too close to the bevel, of course. And I'm going to hit Control B, and I'm going to bevel this out into just a chamfer. That looks good. And now you can do this a couple of different ways. Let's see how we extrude faces along nominals, shift, and move that in just a touch. And let's see how that looks. It's not too bad. This shading's a little weird there, but let's see. I can shade that smooth, auto smooth. Is it not? Let's check out the modifiers, mirror, bevel, weighted. Everything looks pretty good. We can sharpen up the bevel a little bit. All right, not too bad. So it gives it a little bit of extra detail. And we've got these hip joints here that have ridges, but I'm not doing the Coke bottle look on that one. All right, so I'm hitting Control Spacebar so I can get a really nice view. I'm going to grab the kneecap area, jump into Face, Select, and what we can do is pull up the grid modeler on this one. Looks pretty good. Kind of bring that out. Now what I want to do is need a circle cut through here or something close, maybe something like an oval shape. So we're going to give Grid Modeler the opportunity to cut something nice for us. And as I'm cutting this piece out, I want to try to cut the shape of this border as much as possible. So I'll just follow what I've got. Don't try to be like all hyper specific and stress yourself out. Just get it really close. This grid modeler does not have to be perfect. You can adjust a ton of things here. And I like that. That looks pretty good. So now I'm going to right click, left click, and I could add a bevel to this. I don't think I'm actually going to bevel it, but I do want to scale it down. And let's hit G, kind of move this in a little bit more of a centered position so that matches nicely. And I'll hit Q. And what that's going to do is that can cut my boolean. And there's two things I actually want to do here so that this works out really nice. I'm actually going to create a face first, and then I'll separate the face. I'll jump back to object mode. So now we got the separate face. I'm actually going to jump back in here. Let's just jump into G and X and move that out a little bit so I can see it when I'm working. I'm going to grab the face again, and this way, when I hit Grid Modeler, I can cut this shape out. And bring the resolution up. That looks pretty good. Now I'll just cut this out. Like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you probably can make it very, very close. That looks nice. There's a little piece there, a little piece there. And you could make this a little bit bigger or smaller. Doesn't matter because we can scale. You can scale everything, so just keep it looking as good as you can. And Q. There we go. So now I'll have this boolean cut, and I want to drag the slider until I blow a hole straight through. And so now I've got a hole through here, and you can see now I've got an adjustment to make to that. And I think that actually looks tremendous. So I'm just going to click off and go back to object mode. I want to hide that for a second. And so now we've got this nice cutout in the middle, this really, really nice boolean. And what I can do, because these are supposed to be like pumps, like hydraulic pumps, so they are kind of big anyways. So let's put the origin to the geometry. And let's scale these in. They still need to be big enough to look like they could potentially support the mech itself. All right, I don't want to go to rendered view. G and Z. And just kind of free float that and bring that up. I don't want that to protrude into this area. All right, I like that. Now we can beef that up. I'm actually pretty happy that separating came out the way it did. So Control Spacebar. I'm going to come back over. And you see we've got these pumps. And like the model I made, I had these pumps kind of going into the mesh. It was not as specific as this since I'm actually doing some grid modeling. So let's grab that other piece now that I hid. It should just be in leg. There it is. And I'll bring that piece back. Now, this one can get the bullion and everything, but I want to move it around a little bit, kind of start it off here. And I want to add a mirror to this piece, and I will mirror it across the same main piece. I'll just keep mirroring it off of the same one. And so now if I jump into face select and E to extrude, maybe go a little bit further, G and XX will go from global to local. And I can move things around. I want to jump back into object mode, so GXX, and I can kind of line that bad boy up. And I want to make sure to apply the scale to this. Shade that one smooth, and then I want to auto smooth that so it looks good. Go back to the modifiers. I've only got the mirror on it, so I'm going to grab the foot, Control C, and copy those modifiers. So now I've got a nice bevel on that piece. And if you go into the third view here, you can see you've kind of got some corners there. You could go in here and scale this a little bit if you want and kind of mesh it into the corners, or you can go into edge select, and let me just see if I can hide that piece, grab this one and go into vertex select and see how this bullion looks. Cool. I'm going to select the outer edge. It should be a pretty nice bevel, so Control B. And I want to add a little bit of a chamfer to this. You could bevel it, but it seems to be throwing the shading off a little bit, so I'm just going to go with that. That looks pretty good, and I didn't get the other side. So let's grab the other side, and I'm Shift Alt right clicking to encapsulate that loop. And I'll just throw a little bevel on there, or chamfer, excuse me. Make sure that looks pretty good. I'll come back over and I'll bring that bad boy back and see how that looks. Now we've got this little area. It's going to catch some shadows, and it's offset, so it looks a little funky. Let's see here. That's pretty good. I'm going to stick with that. It is catching the shadows. I could deal with that. It almost looks like a shading error, but ultimately nothing is going to be completely flawless. And so I really want to go in here, and I want to grab these pieces and separate these by selection and jump out. Just grab these, you know the drill. And I want to add good old-fashioned solidify, even thickness, bring this one down, apply it, and I can go ahead and add a little geometry. I'm going to keep it the same, do 4, and keep it in the same direction. Now I should go back and add my wireframe. Wireframe up. Don't replace original unless you want to. You can replace that and kind of change the thickness. I'm going to get a little bit closer so you can see if it's looking really garbage. Something like that, and I'll go with relative. Come back, and now we've got this nice lead up. It's pretty clean. It's a pretty clean setup. And that's where I'm going to leave it in this video. I really appreciate you guys watching. Smash that subscribe and smash that like button on the way out, and we'll do some more cleanup, touch up, some extra booleans. You know, by using Grid Modeler, you take like 75-80% of your booleans out of it because you're you're grid modeling it, and that would be how you would do the Boolean anyways, and then you get those results much quicker. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you all in part 3.